So hi everybody, I'm Anna. If you don't know me, I head content and communications for Atera, and I'm very excited to kick off this webinar with two incredible guests. Gil Pekelman, our co-founder and CEO. Again, I'm sure you've seen him around, and today you're gonna get to hear some very exciting things coming from him and Atera. And Rich Freeman, that again, some of you probably may know from Channelholic. He's the founder and the executive editor at Channelholic, and also a journalist with many, many years of writing about managed services. So between these two amazing guests, I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation. And before we do, I'd really love to go into a few of the housekeeping rules that we have here. This is all to make it completely accessible, and whenever you need it in terms of content, this webinar is being recorded. I know you guys ask that a lot, so right after the webinar is done, within 24 hours, you're going to get a recording of the session to anyone who registered. And we encourage you, as always, to place your questions or comments for Gil and Rich in the Q&A section. Makes it easier for us to follow the questions. So try to keep it in the Q&A tab if you can, please. And per usual, at the end of this webinar, we're going to host a live Q&A. So get those questions ready. So right in time, I'd like to kick this off with a part of the title, autonomous IT. You can hear him, right? So autonomous IT. But before we get into autonomous IT, I'd like to ask about agentic AI. I know everybody has been throwing around the term. I'd really love to know, when being compared to generative AI that we really commonly see, what is the difference? Can you really help us kind of define to kick this session off? And Gil, this is for you.
This is for me. Okay. So first of all, the term itself is a very new term. It's from mid 2024, so from about 8 months ago. And the premise of agentic AI is this understanding that ChatGPT or the LLM models are actually able not only to talk to you and play back text or voice, but they're actually able to do real things in the real world. And from that understanding, development started to try to take an LLM and get through its reasoning, give it hands and tools to do actual things in the real world. Specifically in Atera, we started working on it in June of 2022. So that's about 6 months before ChatGPT was released to the world. It was a version of ChatGPT that was called ChatGPT 3 Private Beta. And we've been working on AI for a long time. So the first thing we tried to do was make it do things, not only talk back to us, but actually do actions. And we looked for a name for a very long time, Anna. And we didn't, we tried to find, because we felt we were pioneers, but agentic is the name that was actually that caught. And today, the meaning of agentic AI is a technical architecture, but it's a technical architecture that lends itself to AI that does things in the real world and not just replies to you with an answer. Maybe I'll add, but before we, one more point on that is that you can actually think of agentic AI or agents as people and a person that's able to do something. It's a way to think of how it works. So you can think of an agent, an agent that can fix your computer because it's slow, or reset your password, or add you to a group in an email group. So all these actions are actually created by developing an agent that has these capabilities. Okay, Rich, from your perspective, because I have this perspective as a developer, a technology company, what do you see in the world at large about the talk about agentic, what people are thinking agentic is, or what they're doing with agentic, etc.
Well, like you say, I do come at this from a slightly different perspective in that as a journalist, I'm writing about it, and we'll get into this later on in the webinar. But the agentic market, agentic AI market, it's an emerging one, but I think everybody expects it to be enormous, and therefore everyone and their uncle says that they're doing it already, and they all define it differently. And so I need to kind of figure out, well, what does this really mean? And I've spoken to a lot of analysts and a lot of experts, and I basically arrived at a list of criteria. So for me, agentic AI is any technology that meets this particular set of criteria. And so it's got to be a technology that can remember what it did earlier, plan what it's going to do next, interface with your application. So it's supposed to be doing stuff in the real world for you. Therefore, it's got to be able to connect to your email and your CRM and whatever else it is that it needs access to in order to get things done for you. It's got to be able to collaborate with other agents. Because if your agent is booking travel for you, it's going to be talking probably to a travel agent. That they've got to be able to work together. Because it can remember, it's got to be able to learn over time, and based on that learning, get better at what it does. And then the single most important thing that really defines agentic AI is that it's got to be able to do all of this fully autonomously. And I would underscore the word fully, basically. So unless you have trained it, instructed it to consult with you at some point in a process, or if it runs into some set of conditions, it's got to be able to do work on your behalf, start to finish, entirely on its own. And if it can, and it meets these other criteria, then from my perspective, it qualifies as agentic AI. Now, so that's my private pain, Gil, is dealing with all these companies that say they're doing agentic AI, but they mean different things. You might run into a slightly different one. So what I see certainly as well is that when people are talking about agentic AI, they'll say agentic AI, they'll say AI, they'll say automation, and they'll kind of talk about these things as if they're all the same thing. And automation is something that has been around in this industry. It's something that companies like Atera have been doing, something that MSPs have been taking advantage of forever, but it is different from AI or agentic AI. So from your perspective, from an Atera perspective, what are those differences?
Okay, that's a great question. I'll share with the forum my experience for a minute. I'm sure you, and then I'll talk about the technical side of it. But if you remember your first interaction with ChatGPT, where you gave it a question and suddenly it answered intelligently, it understood, you wrote a follow-up question and you got that same kind of experience. I had the same experience with agentic, in this case, Atera's agentic AI. Because what we did is we gave it an IT problem. It did all kinds of tests on its own. It made its own decisions, had reasoning. So within your list, Rich, it's, one of the things is it has reasoning. It understood, and then it solved the problem. And when I saw that for the first time, I had the same, this was late 2022. I had the same type of experience that a lot of people had when they first interacted with ChatGPT and said, this thing is smart. It's like a person. Okay, so that's a little bit about this. It's almost a religious experience because it's like meeting an alien for the first time, lack of better words. The difference between automation it's a great question, and it's huge. It's actually not really comparable because automation, when you think about it, it's an algorithm that has a threshold, and when that threshold is crossed, a script or something deterministic happens. Agents don't behave like that. They understand. I'll talk about, in this case, Atera's a little bit it's a multi-agentic architecture. So it gets a problem, and it understands the problem, and then has all kinds of things it can do very similar to what an IT professional would do, and it can then decide what it wants to check. Let's say if somebody has a problem with his computer that it's slow, it can run these checks autonomously. And the big difference is that automations are fixed. They have a threshold, they run something, it's very, very limited. If it's out of these two limitations, it doesn't do anything. There's not many, you can't make automations for everything, you can only for very specific things. Agents, agentic architecture is open. It understands, and it has, first of all, as a base, all the data in the world, because we know these LLMs have all the internet and a lot of information about that. So it has not only all the data, but has this reasoning capability. It's flexible, it learns, it grows, and it's able to do things, execute all the time. So it's very, very, it's a little bit like I said before. You should imagine it as an employee that gets an IT problem and is able to solve it. It's not comparable in that sense to an automation, which is a very straightforward, if this happens, do this, and that's it. Rich, from your perspective, this is it's really transformative. So, I mean, we know we're into it. We have customers running, we call it Autopilot. Running Autopilot, which is our agentic architecture. We are seeing that it's solving around 30 to 40% of all their tickets autonomously. Just think about the impact, the load that is taken off the shoulders of the IT department and the end users that have a 24/7 technician at their service, answers always immediately, solves these problems in minutes. What are you seeing in the world in terms of even adopting these kinds of transformative technologies?
Well, let me talk about that a little bit, because that transformative potential that you're talking about is something that a lot of people, and in context well beyond IT management, a lot of companies, both in terms of the companies producing the technology and the potential consumers of the technology, are very, very excited about it right now. So let me just share a few slides. And these are headlines grabbed off the internet from just within the last few months. I sort of alluded to this before. Every technology company that counts out there right now is talking as often and as loudly as possible about agentic AI at all times, because this is regarded as a massive market opportunity. So Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, Meta, you name it, they are all talking constantly about that right now, and for good reason. Because even though the technology is in its infancy and a lot of people are talking about it without actually delivering it, there is enormous interest in it from businesses out there. So Boston Consulting Group did some research. 67% of the executives that they surveyed are considering autonomous agents as part of their AI transformation, 2/3 already, before they even really have seen this technology at work. Deloitte predicts that this year, in 2025, a quarter of companies that use Gen AI will launch some kind of agentic pilot or proof of concept. By 2027, you're looking at half of companies that are actually going to be doing that. Now, that's kind of broadly, if you're surveying IT managers. Let's get a little bit more zeroed in on our industry here. So this is data from a company called OpsRamp, and they went out specifically to MSPs. And this is research they did last year, but they were asking them, what are technologies that are strategic to you this year in 2024? And you can see there are a lot of like real kind of basic bread and butter technologies on this list here, infrastructure management, network performance monitoring, application performance monitoring, basic stuff. What is at the top of the list, though, right? It's AI and using that to automate IT operations. So it's very top of mind, specifically for MSPs right now. And I'll put that even in a slightly larger context again right here. This is very recent survey data from a company called Trey.ai. They went out to technology professionals and kind of asked them, what from your perspective, are the top business use cases for AI agents? And they gave them a whole list of options there. You're seeing data processing automation, customer service. Salesforce is talking a lot about AI agents right now. So those are two scenarios that get a ton of attention and mind share out there right now. But you go to the technology professionals, and what far and away is the top use case from their perspective? It is service desk automation. So there's a lot of excitement out there, a lot of interest about the potential that agentic AI can have for MSPs, for IT departments, for anyone who is dealing with service desk. And, it's for good reason, basically. A few months ago, I was interviewing an analyst from Forrester who specializes in agentic AI. His name is Leslie Joseph. And in the course of the interview, I asked him, what kind of an impact do you expect agentic AI to have specifically on IT management? And he said IT management is ground zero for disruption with agentic AI. If you're looking for the place where it's going to have the biggest, earliest, most meaningful impact, IT management is the place to look because it is so well set up to do that job very effectively and very cost effectively in particular. So what are some of the issues that might slow all of that down? Well, first of all, hype. Like I was saying before, everybody says they've got it or they're going to have it tomorrow or this evening. And so there are going to be a lot of promises made that maybe people don't deliver on. That's going to be a bit of a turnoff for some folks. Data is a big issue. You were talking about having access to all the data in the world. It's got to be high quality data, not just a lot of data, but high quality data. It's got to be sort of consolidated and organized for an agent to really do good things with it. That's going to take a little time, I think, for a lot of companies to do. I think businesses are going to want to understand in like a clear dollars and cents sort of way, well, what is the ROI? If I invest in this, if I purchase a technology of this kind, where and when and how big of a return am I going to get on that investment? Then there's what I call the perception of risk, which is, obviously we are in the context of generative AI. We have all not only heard of, but experienced on a regular basis the phenomenon of hallucination. And so if we're asking MSPs in particular to set an agent loose on an end user environment autonomously, there's going to be some trepidation about that, a perception of this being a risky thing. And it's going to take some time for folks to overcome that fear factor, that perception of risk. And then last but not least, perception of threat. And by that, I don't mean security threat necessarily, although that is something that will be on people's mind. I mean the idea that if I'm an IT professional, is this thing coming for my job, basically? Is it a threat to me professionally? And, I'm in Austin attending an event. I was interviewing the CEO of a holding company that oversees like 80 MSPs. And, he was kind of saying, I don't know what some of my people will be doing 5 years from now. There's some uncertainty there. But if you look near term, medium term, here's some data again from Boston Consulting Group. where they asked IT professionals, what kind of an impact do you expect agentic AI to have on your IT workforce? And some of them, as you can see at the top there, are anticipating they're actually going to hire more full-time human employees to capitalize on the potential of this technology. 68% of them said that they're going to capitalize on the productivity that agentic AI produces in other ways. You've got maybe a quarter of folks there who are sort of saying it's all going to kind of wash out the same in terms of staffing and so on. Only 7% of the people who were surveyed here anticipate that they will actually be letting people go. So there is a perception of threat that this technology might put technicians out of work. There really isn't very much evidence that I've seen yet to suggest that that's happening or that it's imminent.
Yeah. I'd actually add some color to that from the field. So what we're seeing with our customers that are using, we divide the AI, the architecture is the same. It's agentic AI or agents, but it has two types of applications. One is the autopilot, the autonomous part, and then the Copilot, which is the assistant to our customers. We, from the field, we are seeing them being relieved from all the pain of dealing with the mundane and repetitive, and actually freeing up time for projects, things that they've been wanting to do for a long time, etc. So we're not seeing actually any, we have not seen so far any, and we have Copilot, we have thousands of users. We've not seen any case where headcount has gone down. Only the opposite, just like your slide, the slide shows.
Yeah. Well, let's bring the agentic conversation. Let's ground it a little bit more in the real world by talking about your AI initiatives at Atera. You've actually got two AI-based technologies that you folks have. One called Copilot, the other called Autopilot that you were talking about before. Copilot is more akin to Microsoft Copilot or the kind of AI technology we're seeing from some of the other IT management vendors out there. Autopilot, from my perspective, just writing about the industry, is sort of one of a kind, at least for right now. But from your perspective, Gil, talk a little bit about those two technologies, what they do, how they differ from one another, and the pain points, the thinking behind each of them.
Okay, just for perspective for a minute, we've started to work on AI in general in 2014. Our first patents were in 2017, and our biggest breakthrough was in 2020 when we got access to ChatGPT 3 private beta, etc. And we've been working on it very hard for the last 2.5 years. So we're really into it. We're very experienced. And we've built something that has a lot of traction and a lot of experience in the field. The architecture is the same. So we have one architecture. This is the multi-agentic architecture. And you have all kinds of agents of all kinds of type of agents that know how to do all kinds of things. And then this capability of reasoning and data collection and running IT tests, etc., interacts with two types of groups. One group is IT professionals. And then using all these tools, that's the Copilot. It's an assistant to IT professionals that does a very large number of things. But the end of the process is that a person makes the final decision. And it helps. For example, you can ask it in free language to create a script, to do some very complex procedure that you want to do every Tuesday or every morning or something like that. It will create the script in a second. It's like having a shared script library with all of human knowledge of how to write a script at your fingertips. Another press of the button and you automate it within Atera and it runs. Copilot, and it works. It's a helper, an assistant to IT professionals. I'll give a couple of more examples of its capabilities. You go through a whole process of interacting on a ticket and on a problem. You press a button. It takes all that dialogue, which could have gone on in over a few days, creates a knowledge base article in a second, and that knowledge base article is then added to your system. And not only can your other technicians access it the next time this type of problem happens, Copilot, Autopilot learn from it. So the next time the same thing happens, they've learned that this is how you solved it. That's Copilot. Autopilot is what you call the full autonomous system. It interacts with the end user. It doesn't interact with the IT professional. It interacts, and it actually is like another employee. The interaction is done either through email, Slack, or Teams. And the user will open a ticket just like he opens a ticket today, and it will communicate with him just like a very sophisticated LLM would. It's always there. It answers in a second. And it has limits, and it knows its limits. And if the problem is within its boundaries, it'll solve it there and then. And if the problem is outside of its boundaries, it'll escalate it to an IT professional, to one of your people. But when it escalates it, it's a smart ticket. And a smart ticket is a ticket that's already run all the diagnostics that you would have run yourself to try to solve this problem with the results. It will summarize the problem and what it thinks is the solution to the problem given the input from the diagnostics, and you'll get a button that it recommends you to use in order to solve the problem. But you can keep on the dialogue, and it's a ticket. You make the decision. This is the escalation, and this is the autopilot. So we have two products, we can call it. One is the autopilot, the autonomous, fully autonomous part that knows how to solve ID problems on its own, and the copilot, which is an assistant to IT professionals, and they work hand in hand. So it escalates from one to the other. Autopilot at this point is able to solve 30 to 40% of all tickets that come at it, which is literally for IT people is a religious experience. It's not really technical. To see something like that happen suddenly, it's something that you cannot expect until you really see it. Rich, there is an issue of, we are aware that what we've done in the last 2.5 years is not really out there in the field. How do you see people but embracing it? How do you see the process happening? There is, we are aware that, people might be a little bit concerned, or there's at essence here, an issue that you've never experienced this. It's not like going and comparing different products and saying, I'll try this one now. This is to try something that you've never tried before. What are you seeing there? And what is your opinion? I'll ask, and the Copilot side. So the autopilot, in a sense, is autonomous. It's like hiring another 3 employees now to help the team. The Copilot is a decision-making process or an assistant in the day-to-day work. How do you see people actually adopting that as well?
So let me start there, because that's the technology that is most available to MSPs and has been available in the IT management world for a little while. And I think there is still a lot of room for adoption and use and growth. I think the barrier there is simply that it's new. And like anything else in AI, you start out by figuring out, well, what is this? How can I use this? How do I kind of put this to work? And so I think that's what's kind of going on there with Copilot and technologies like Copilot. It's very different on the Autopilot side of things, and I'll kind of answer that by calling out a comment I'm looking at in chat here from Adam Lavery, because I was talking about the perception of risk with Agentic AI before, and he very accurately says it's not a perception of risk that's the issue. It's the real risk that an autonomous agent does something that causes a serious issue. And you are exactly right. And thank you for pointing out that it is not a perception of risk. This is a real and legitimate concern. And this is sort of the biggest question an issue that I encounter with MSPs right now. As an MSP, you are paid to keep end users up and running. And you absolutely do not want to deploy a technology that breaks stuff. You break stuff for a customer, and you've got an unhappy customer, maybe an ex-customer. You don't want to deploy anything that's going to make your life harder instead of easier. And this is a very novel, new kind of technology out there. So that, that's the main concern. And you are familiar with this issue, Gil, because every time I interview you about Autopilot, I always ask you the same question, and you've got to be really tired of it by now. I will always ask you, has it broken anything? Is it hallucinating, or have there been because even I write about this all the time. Relatively speaking, I'm kind of bullish about it, and I still have these questions and these concerns, and it's not my livelihood to kind of unleash this technology on an end user environment. So I think that's where we're at there now, is people are trying to develop the trust to actually start using this stuff and believe that it's going to make their life easier versus harder. But I want to go back to this idea of grounding things in the real world. So here I am talking
about. Let me just comment on that, Rich, for a second on the security issue. So the autonomous part does things that are very specific. It doesn't go and do whatever it wants. There's a set of things that it can solve and is allowed to solve, and that's it. And you see the list before you install it, and you can tweak the list. And none of those things can cause harm. That's how it works. The worst case scenario is it doesn't solve the issue, and the ticket is escalated to a person. But the way it works is that it's a fixed set of problems it can solve, and that's it. It can't tweak. It can't do anything around outside of that list and those boundaries. Anything outside of that list, it will take, just like John said before, it will take it and escalate it to a human, and the human will make all the decisions, but he'll have all the information at his fingertips already tested and diagnosed, etc. So the time to solve it is much faster. I'll add one more thing with Rich, if I can. Atera's built this on top of something called Microsoft Azure OpenAI. In Azure OpenAI, we can discuss that at length. The biggest thing around Azure OpenAI is privacy and security. So this one concern is one of the biggest things we've been dealing with in the 2.5 years. We've been working on it to make sure it cannot cause any harm. Back to you.
You, in a conversation we had, I think just a few months ago, you likened this issue to, having tools on a tool belt. You've equipped Autopilot with a set of tools on its tool belt. If there is no tool on the tool belt for delete that very important virtual server, it can't do it, and it won't do it. And so that risk doesn't exist. It can only kind of do the things it has a tool to do, and you've obviously only put tools on the tool belt for safe work. We're talking a lot about risk, but what an MSP has to think about is the risk-reward equation here. So let's talk a little bit about the reward side of that a little bit. You've got MSPs who are actually using Autopilot now. You've got IT departments who are using it. You're working with design partners. Talk a little bit about some of the real-world use cases and benefits that companies you're familiar with are experiencing right now.
Okay, so first of all, interaction with the Autopilot is done through email, Slack, Teams, etc. So your users or your customers, if you're an MSP, interact just like the way they would interact with you anyway. The big difference is they can do it 24/7. You don't have to pay for it extra. You don't have to have shifts in place to do that. 24/7. It answers immediately. So the level of service you're providing, being either an internal department or an MSP, is fantastic. Immediate answer. We actually see in the data we have of our customers that once they implement Autopilot, the time to first response goes from minutes, hours to zero. It's you don't understand the numbers when you see it the first time. Now, the things it knows to do, I'll give a few examples, but you'll see that they're the mundane, the repetitive, the things you don't want to do, and that there's no risk there. And we've been working on the risk issue all the time. So it's things like password resets. And even more so, it is able to detect that you have a user that has a problem with his password, forgot it, miswrote it, etc. And it can detect on its own that he's having problems and communicate it with him through his phone and say, hey, are you having a problem? Did you forget your password? You want me to reset it? And it's able to identify him. It's a 2FA mechanism. And if he says yes, it knows how to do that, and you never have to deal with this again. You have those users that do things that unlock them outside of their accounts. It can bring them back in automatically after identifying them. You never have to deal with that. Again, installing software, but again, it's installing software that is predefined in a list of software that you've approved it to install. So Zoom version X, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, or Teams version Y. So it's very specific things that it's allowed to install. And if it's outside of that list, it'll escalate the ticket. The interesting thing with that example, for example, is that if there's a problem with Zoom, it can conclude that the way to solve it is to uninstall the current version and install a newer version, and all that will be handled autonomously. So 24/7, immediate reply, minutes to solve, without any of your team having to deal with that. That happens automatically. Releasing spam from various spam engines, and this is your decision. You can decide not to give it that. The tool belt analogy, you can decide not to give it that capability, but our customers are doing that because spam that is a very safe spam in a sense in the systems is something that you can give it to do instead of all the hassle when you have a user calling and saying he thinks he has this email that was caught in spam, etc. Things like my PC is slow. It's very good at solving that. It solves that. It doesn't answer the end user and say to him, look, do this, do that, click here, reboot, etc. It does it for him, just like a technician would. Things that have to do with your calendar, setting meetings. One of the requests and our users are doing, for example, if I want to give Rich access to my calendar so we can have a shared calendar, all the user has to do is say, can you, just like you would do to the IT department, say, can you guys link our calendars together? The AI will do it for him. It won't involve you. Things like Excel support, which was something that a lot of our customers this is thrown at them. People have problems with Excel or Visual Basic in Excel. They can just interact with Autopilot. It will help them achieve what they want to do, etc. And there's quite a lot of things. The end game of this whole list is between 30 to 40% of the load is transformed into an environment that is 24/7 available, is immediate response, minutes to solve, and it takes this load off your team. And your team has time suddenly to deal with more important things. I don't know if that's clear. I'm seeing some questions here that maybe I can relate to in a second. Adam is asking, is it semi-AI? No, it's not. It's fully autonomous. So it'll solve the problem. And it also understands when it's not able to solve it or it's not allowed to solve it, and then it'll escalate it to a person. And that's actually Autopilot doing the escalation to Copilot. There's a question for a live demo. Actually, I'll show you guys an example of the reset password, where the AI understands the problem on its own. Even the user doesn't even have to say I have a problem with my password. It identifies the issue and runs the whole process to get him out of it without involving the IT department. It can be done at any time. It can be, you can have, if you're an MSP and you have a customer, it's outside of your working hours. There is no outside of your working hours anymore. It'll get him out of this problem, whatever time zone he's at.
I'll jump in just for a second. Maybe we can run the video. It's recorded, so you all can see what that looks like, and then we'll go straight into answering the questions. Although I know we have a lot of different things we wanted to cover, but I'm seeing the chat being very lively, and I think there are some great ones here for you guys to take on. So let's run the video and then jump straight into the questions.
Good. You're limited to a templated response. No, the response in the dialogue, I'll give you another example. We have this customer, he called me up to tell me this story, that one of his employees, she opened a ticket and wrote in the ticket, can you please reschedule a meeting I have with a colleague of mine? She's sick and I have to move it to next week. So the response of Autopilot was, no problem, I will reschedule it to next week. Technically is a relatively simple thing, but it then said, but the most important thing is that your colleague will feel better. Don't worry about rescheduling, I'll handle that, but your colleague should feel better. And so it's also empathetic, and the EQ is there, and it's never tired and never cranky. And actually, it never quits either. You never have to retrain it again. It also never eats, just so you guys know. Do we want to go into some Q&A, Anna?
Yeah, I will scroll
We'll
all.
really,
Yeah. Let's do that. So first of all, thank you for engaging with the chat. Let's start with one of the first ones. This was early on. So the question was, does Autopilot integrate with existing RMMs and other technologies?
Yes. So Autopilot itself. So you have three components to Autopilot. One is the interface with your end users. So there you can choose whatever you want. It can be email, Slack, Teams. I don't think there's anything else in the universe at this point that is not one of those three or all three, etc. And on the ticketing side, it's also, in a sense, it can be a Atera system, and there's benefits to that, or it can be a different ticketing system. It knows how to interface to that. And then the third component is the RMM itself, which in the case of Atera, those that work with Atera know it's an all-in-one solution. So it's RMM and PSA ticketing, but you can also only use the RMM side. So you can choose between email, Slack, Teams, Atera, RMM, ticketing, PSA, or if you want to use a different ticketing system, you can split the RMM and the ticketing, and then you'll have the three systems there in place.
Awesome. I think the next question, or one of the questions that I saw, was actually about Copilot and how we're using the name Copilot, because it's a Microsoft product. So maybe you can touch on
we
how
were
we.
first. No. That's a good question. I'm not sure it's the best choice of name. I'll say that.
We're
But in
definitely
terms of concept,
again.
I think the forum understands how it works. It's like it's your Robin, you're Batman, and this is your Robin. And the autopilot is autonomous, so it's a different type. That's your robot. So you have a robot that takes care of things autonomously, and then you have Robin here that helps you. Maybe we'll just call it Robin, and that helps you all the time and assists you. Okay, so and the word the use Copilot. We work very closely with Microsoft, so they haven't said anything to us in the last 2.5 years, but you guys have a good point there. It's not the best choice of name.
We also haven't been really the only ones since I think Copilot is very descriptive. I think that was the
Yeah,
idea
that was the
generally.
idea in early days.
Yeah.
Remember, we put it out there before we had the concept even before it was public, Copilot. So there's a question here: how are the users interacting with Autopilot through what app? So actually, I forgot one. So there's Slack, Teams, email, and we have a portal. Forgot the portal before. So there's 4 applications that the user can interact, and it's a chat. It's just like you would open a ticket. They'll interact just like any normal ticket they open today. It understands them. They'll write and whatever spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. It understands. Not only does it understand, it also knows how to keep the dialogue going. So maybe somebody will write something and it won't be sure exactly what it means. So it'll say, can you explain to me what is slow? Is it your computer or the specific application? So it'll continue the dialogue, just like anybody that's chatted with ChatGPT knows that it can continue the process. It doesn't stop where you stop necessarily.
There was also a question about SMS. Joe said that's the preferred way to communicate. That's how my clients prefer to communicate with me. Are we looking at SMS?
So
Um,
SMS, that they send you an actual SMS, not WhatsApp, not old-fashioned SMS. Is that we haven't received that request, but shouldn't be too complicated.
I will jump to a question about how Agentic AI from Caroline. How will Agentic AI shake up the business models for MSPs? And maybe Rich, you can kind of touch on that.
Yeah, the potential implications. So as you said before, I've been writing about managed services for a long time. I wrote my first article about managed services almost 20 years ago. A lot has changed in the industry in that time, but one thing that hasn't is that the sort of central key to profitability is productivity, and when you can scale your workforce without actually having to hire and pay people, when you can scale your customer base without having to hire and pay people because you have technology that can handle that workload for you, the implications are enormous. Actually, for MSPs out there. And then the other thing from a business model standpoint, if you think about the work that your people, your technicians are doing today, and then imagine AI doing a bigger and bigger share of that, like starting at level 1 and sort of working up from there. You're now freeing up resources that you can apply in other areas. And so there's this, something that every MSP in particular has to think about all the time is, how do I avoid commoditization? How do I avoid becoming just another company doing what everybody else is doing? And the more you can get into, actual outcome-based solutions and strategic consulting and really helping businesses get leaner, get more productive by using technology, that's how you both generate profit and sticky customer relationships. And you're going to have more resource on the team now for that kind of engagement with the client that AI won't be able to do anytime soon, basically. So I think those are the two big kind of business model shifts that come to mind immediately.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'll just strengthen what Rich is saying. You have the efficiency side, and then you have, as an MSP, the advantages of the service side, that you're giving services that nobody else can give, and 24/7, immediate, etc. And just for the forum, we have customers already using it, and they're charging extra. So they come to their customer and say, look, we're going to add this agent capability. We're going to give you can open a ticket anytime. 40% of the cases, it's going to be solved there and then, immediately, etc. And they charge extra for it. So it's also an increase, it's efficiency, it's competitive service that nobody else can give, and it's an increased revenue stream. We're seeing that as people are doing that.
Thank you both. I
Anna,
actually
there was a question about compliance, so if I can grab that one. So this we're doing with Microsoft, just in way of 2.5 years of working very closely with Microsoft on what's called the Microsoft Azure OpenAI platform. And Microsoft gives a very strong framework for privacy and security. So, for example, there's an LLM, there's an AI, but it learns from your data, but your customer's data, or your data, depends if you're a company or an MSP, stays with them, doesn't go out, doesn't go to the LLM, isn't used by other companies. It's secure, closed, doesn't go anywhere. And in terms of privacy, it also is not you. It doesn't go out of this box that's built around your instance of Autopilot and Copilot. It's also ISO 27K, SOC 2, HIPAA, FedRAMP. So it's also a system that is very robust in terms of all the certifications around it. And then there's a whole world of responsible and ethical AI. So talking about hallucinations, etc. These systems are limited there. They're not open systems. These are systems that are built to solve IT problems. So you cannot start, we've seen these things happen already. You can't develop a relationship with it. It won't go there. It'll say to you, I'm an IT professional. That's not what I do. We know already today of people that, literally fall in love with ChatGPT. But really do. I mean, they give it a name and develop a relationship. So it won't do that. So you have those layers of privacy, security, compliance, responsibility, and ethical behavior.
That's great. There's a really great question that came in that kind of talks to maybe some of the customization that we're going to be able to offer around Autopilot. So the question is from Raymond, asking, in the password reset scenario, like the one you showed, his team would have had a few extra steps involving identity verification, reason for lockout, and force user to change the password. Would we be able to update the workflow and require specific policies and procedures, including documentation?
Absolutely. So what I showed was a demo of a certain scenario, but there's a backend to this system where you can define all kinds of your processes. For example, people don't want it to do more than once this exercise. So if it's a hacker, he cannot keep on doing it. It'll do it once, or other means of verification, etc. Yes, there's a backend. This is within our RMM, and there you can, all kinds of parts of the Autopilot, you can actually define and configure how you want it to work. Definitely.
Great. As time is coming up, I think maybe it would be great to look at a question. I think it was Adam, maybe slightly philosophical, or maybe you both would think not, but he's asking if it would be fair to call this semi-AI. So if we're talking about the Autopilot, the AI is about understanding the issue and then just leads to a set of defined allowed actions, or do you see it in another way?
No. First of all, you should come to our labs. just to see how it works. No, it doesn't work like that. It thinks and reasons and decides, and it's iterative. So it can do some tests and get data and then say, okay, if this is the data I got from these tests, I'll do 2 or 3 other tests. And it makes these own decisions on its own. And in many cases, it'll make better decisions than humans because of all the information, the data. It has all the data in the world, and it has all the data of your organization. So it sees all the historical tickets, and it's able to understand what kind of fixes you've done in the past. So, and it makes its own decisions. There is no part of it that is structured or is a decision tree or anything like that. It's literally like having a person behind it. So it's the same type of process, except that it has much more data at its fingertips than a person would. I'll add another technical geeky thing is that if an agent learns something, not on your data, doesn't share it, but learns some trick, some process, all the agents learn it immediately, as opposed to humans, where we learn something, for somebody else to learn it as well, we need to teach them. And it's not a scale here, it's immediate. So the power of it is also as time goes by and it does more and more IT problems, it fixes more IT issues, it improves all the time.
Rich, do you see it the same way, maybe to kind of top this off?
Yeah, and I think I know where you're coming from, Adam, on that. What maybe feels semi-AI about it is because there are limits, there are guardrails in terms of what it can and can't do. But to Gil's point, and specifically in terms of Autopilot, there is an artificial form of intelligence. There is, software-based reasoning happening. It is doing what AI does. It's just that because human beings created the technology, they can kind of constrict what it does and doesn't do. But yeah, I think just listening to what Gil was saying there, it's full-blown AI, but it feels a little semi because it can't actually go out and do something crazy that if it was left to its own devices, it might.
Sure. Wrapping up on our last sentence.
Yeah, I want to thank you all so much first to our audience for joining and asking all these amazing questions. There's even a question about a trial.
Maybe Anna, just before you wrap that up, I'll say my last
Of course.
comment for the forum. So a lot of the people on this call are customers that I know personally. AI is happening. It's happening fast. No other technology in history has been adopted so quickly. I'm sure you know that ChatGPT or OpenAI have 500 million active monthly users now. So no other technology has ever been adopted so quickly. And fear is not an option. You need to embrace it, test it, and use it as a tool to elevate yourself and not be afraid. Any technology that is not AI, I'm not talking about using AI, is not AI at its core, is already actually obsolete if you think about it. Now, Anna, leaving you to.
Rich, final words too. we can 1 minute more.
Okay. The biggest obstacle that autonomous AI in managed services is going to face is that trust issue. But over time, as people become more familiar with it, that trust will develop. And to Gil's point, basically, you don't want to be the last MSP who has sort of climbed on the agentic bandwagon, because as the technology gets more and more mainstream, it is going to define end user expectations. The great thing about agentic AI for an MSP is it, like Gil was saying, it's working 24/7. What I want as a consumer of IT services is I want an immediate resolution to my issue any hour of any day, and I'm going to start getting that from MSPs that have access to this technology. So I totally get the trust issue, and I'm not advising anyone who is concerned to just kind of leap in without thinking about it. But just, fear is not a long-term strategy here, because there will be a competitive deficit if you just get stuck there.
Great. Thank you both. With that,
And
I'm
I'm saying
just
anybody can contact us for more information and demos and trials, etc. So, feel
yeah,
free.
there are a bunch of questions in the chat that we're gonna
Yeah.
take on and get in touch with you. Also, all the people that asked about trials, we have your data. We're gonna talk to you. And just one last thing, we've attached 10 principles of responsible AI for IT, covering all the different principles, both from Microsoft and Atera. So if you want to check that out in the tab of docs, just to again maybe touch on compliance, trust, and everything else we're doing together with Microsoft. And a last thing, next week we're hosting another incredible webinar. You can just grab the barcode in this slide right here. It will be with our CTO and obviously Oshri, and we would love to see you there. For now, I just want to wish everybody a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.